พิธีกรวดน้ำ water pouring ceremony for dedication of merit to dead relatives and of course all beings in samsara, in suffering realms of illusory thought and dream thinking everywhere in all the three times and around the universe. Theพิธีกรวดน้ำ water pouring ceremony is a ceremony performed by almost all Thai people when they receive blessings from the bhikkhus, the Buddhist monks, after they have given alms and said prayers, making merit, giving alms to the Sangha. You may, if you've been in Thailand, have seen Thai people pouring water out of a metallic receptacle into a bowl, whilst a monk or some monks are chanting prayers, kata. And this usually happens after they have made offerings. They will kneel to the floor and receive the blessing. And sometimes when they wish to offer the merits to the dead relatives, they will beseech the monk to perform the chanting of yata, which is a kata, which is chanted whilst the devotee then pours water into a bowl from the water pouring instrument, a receptacle, and you must be pouring the water the whole time during the chanting, and it should not run out before the chanting finishes. The last drops of water should be poured into the bowl just as the end of the kata is chanted. The word growat-nam comes actually from a Khmer word, which is jurawat, and the word nam, which means water in Thai, the Khmer word jurawat, growat. So it got turned from jurawat into growat, from Khmer into Thai, and the word nam for water was added. In Khmer, they call it jurawat tuk, because they also perform this ceremony. The Thais took the word jurawat and turned it into growat. For the Brahmin people, the Hindu, this ceremony was practiced, and indeed it was the Buddhists who adopted this practice right back in the times when the Buddha was still alive and walking the surface of the earth, and it was just incorporated into Buddhism. And because it was not seen as being detrimental in any way, although it is not a path to enlightenment, the Buddha did not forbid its practice. And so Buddhist and Brahmin people practice it, but it is originally a Brahmin practice, which has been adopted into Buddhist practice. So for the Brahmin people, theพิธีกรวดน้ำ, water pouring, symbolizes the act of pouring water into the earth for Pratme Torani, or the Tarani, earth goddess. And they do that to take their punya, their punya in Pali, bun in Thai means merits, take their merits and pass them on to those who have already passed away, to the dead. For Thai Buddhists, it's the same meaning when this ritual is performed. And so both the ceremony and the meaning of the ceremony has been transferred from Brahmanism, Hindu religion, to Buddhism. There are two versions or two methods for performingพิธีกรวดน้ำ, which people will make their prayer and the ceremony. This is the first method is called grwat-nam-piak, which means to pour wet water, and the second method is called grwat-nam-hang, which means to pour dry water. It sounds, of course, strange. So, to explain further, grwat-nam-piak is the pouring of the water whilst simultaneously chanting the kata which offers the fruits of your merits to the dead. Or you have a special kata to chant for this. Or you can Gruat Nam Heng, which means just to hold your hands together, the palms of your hands in Y, praying position in front of your forehead, with your thumbs together and the tips of your thumbs between your eyebrows. And then just to pray and chant and offer the prayers, the merits in your prayers, dedicate the merit in your prayers to the dead without pouring water. And so dedication of merit in Thai is also called Gruat Nam, but it is the dry method, Gruat Nam Heng. And if you actually perform the pouring ceremony with water, then it is Gruat Nam Piak. Now, there are also two different ways in which merits are offered in Piti Gruat Nam. And one of the ways is to actually speak out the names of specific people whom one may wish to dedicate those merits to. For example, if a relative has recently died, or somebody who you see a tragedy and you wish to pray for people in a tragedy, or something like this. And the second way to dedicate the merits is in a more general and impersonal manner and unbiased manner, and actually a more enlightened manner, to be honest, in my opinion, and offer it all to all beings everywhere. So many Buddhists will know this practice by beginning with to offer to the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, your mother, your father, your teachers, your gurus, and those who you have harmed or upset or bothered, and those who have bothered you and harmed you, and to animals, to the Peta, the Pret, Peta in Sanskrit, in Pali, and Pret in Thai means hungry ghosts, and to the monsters, beings, the deities, and even to the Maras, the demonic, harmful entities, deceptive and harmful entities, mischievous entities. And so to dedicate all of your merits to all beings without prejudice or bias. It's just to practice metta, unbiased, enlightened mercy and compassion. And so this second way is, of course, if you think about it, the more correct way to perform metta practice, mercy and compassion practice, which is one of the 37 practices of the Bodhisattva, the enlightened Bodhisattva, compassionate, enlightened being. But of course, in the case of if a person has a lot of karmic involvement and needs to dissolve karma with a person who has passed away, and you have not settled all of your arguments, and the person passed away leaving things unsaid, then of course the first method of naming specific persons to offer merit to them can also be a very valid and important practice, even on the lowest level, at least for your personal peace of mind, which is necessary to be able to meditate, to be happy, and to function well, and to have a good mood. And so if you have a bad mood, you don't function well, and so and you make more bad karma. And so even on the lowest level, even if you're an atheist, but believe in mind conditioning, then to make your peace with your enemies, even if they are not around anymore, but you really mean it and you perform this practice, you can bring stillness within and rid yourself of self-made worries and bothersome issues and guilt issues, or if you wish to call it karma, then karma. And so both methods have their usefulness, and has been a practice in Brahmanism and Buddhism for now at least 2,500 years, and most probably a lot more than that, I would say, probably 3,000-4,000 years. When you use the water for Gruat Nam, it must be pure, clean water, have no odor or discoloration, no discoloration, and it must be poured into a clean receptacle. Thai Buddhists, we have a special receptacle which is actually manufactured here, especially for that purpose, and is easy to obtain on most streets in Thailand. You can buy Sangha offerings, but you don't have to use the special receptacle. You can also use a suitable receptacle that is not specifically invented for that purpose. It's just you just need instruments for pouring, really, and to have a pure heart and the proper intention when you're doing it, to really mean it. So don't pour it into a dirty receptacle. You need one receptacle for pouring, so something bottle-shaped with perhaps a lip on it so that you can pour without spilling, and a receptacle for receiving that water, which will then later be poured onto the earth. In Thailand, we will do it on the earth over the roots of a tree because of Sing Satit. Thai Buddhists are animists too and believe in tree spirits and spirits within inanimate objects, even rocks, stones, and elemental substances. And so it is a practice to pour it not only onto the earth, but in Thailand we will do that actually on a tree. And so water, why do we use water, and how does that become connected with offering to transfer merits to dead relatives or to the dead? It's because water is the communication medium, so it can be used to transport things from one place to another, to flow down the stream. And earth is, of course, the witness. Mother Earth was the witness to the Buddha's enlightenment. When you offer water and pouring, you're not offering water for dead people to be able to drink. It's not like the Egyptians would offer food, and ancient peoples would offer food and treasures for the dead to take with them into the realms of the dead. This is not the meaning of offering the water. You're using the water as a medium to transmit your merits with. And the earth, when you pour it onto it, is the witness to the fact that you are offering your merits, because it was the Mother Earth who rose up when the Buddha called her to be his witness that he had done the things he had claimed, and that he really had become enlightened, and that his merits were greater than the evil Mara who was challenging him. And so Mother Earth, Padme Tarani, rose up and washed away the Maras in a deluge, a flood, which she called upon by squeezing the water out of her long hair. And so she is the witness to his enlightenment, and she is the witness to everything that everybody has ever done since the beginning of time on this earth, and she will witness everything until the end of her days as this earth. And so when you offer your merits, you do have a silent witness who you can call upon if anybody challenges the fact that you did offer those merits. And so the water is the transmission medium, and the earth is your witness to your act of offering merit. And so, as I said, it doesn't really matter that you use the special receptacle. You can use any worthy receptacle, like crystal or porcelain or very nice vase and a bowl, or even a glass and a bowl if you are poor and you cannot afford to keep things above a simple level. What matters is what is in your heart. And so the Buddha once told, there was once a story of, in the time of the Buddha, that there was a very rich people making offerings, but they were giving things that were easy for them to give, for they did not go without. But there was a very poor beggar boy who had nothing, but he wanted to offer something to the Buddha, and he was just a little boy. And so he took up some dust and put it in his bowl and offered it to the Buddha, closing his eyes and wishing and pretending it was gold. And he apologized to the Buddha, but the Buddha said, you actually have given more than the rich people because you have nothing and you gave all that you could give, and you would have given if you had had it as gold. And so your generosity was greater than that of others. And so the moral of that story is, if you really mean it, then that is where the power lies. It doesn't have to be a fancy receptacle. So then the official paraphernalia, however, I will be showing some images of this in the YouTube version of this podcast. And of course, in this sound version of the podcast has a thumbnail which you can see the receptacle which is used for Gruat Nam. And so, if you're listening to this as sound podcast, have a look at the thumbnail of the podcast. If you're watching the YouTube version, then you will know what I'm talking about because you will be seeing it. And so, it's basically a bowl with a kind of bulb-shaped second receptacle, something like looks like a mace, or could be also like a chedi stupa with a high spire on it. And that is where the water is put inside, and the top is screwed off and poured into the wide bowl. The best time for performing the Gruat Nam ceremony is, of course, in the early morning when the Buddhist monks, the bhikkhus, are walking on their alms rounds. And to do this immediately after you have given alms. It is said that it's not really a so good idea to do it later on, because if you forget, then not only do you relinquish the good karma which you have made, also the person you were offering the merit to, who was waiting for it, is left empty-handed too. And so that is seen as rather inauspicious. I personally think that is a matter of whether you believe in that or not, or if you believe in the principle of self-transformation, and that you cannot know. This is my personal view, that I cannot know if the dead person has received my merit or not. I hope so, but whether or not they have, we cannot know. But what does happen is, if we really mean it, and even though we don't know, we really mean it, and it is freely given with pure heart, then we have attained something, and we have raised our mind and our hearts and purified it, even if only in that short moment, and we become more distorted again later and less pure. But in the moment of giving and offering merit, we transform. And so one thing that is sure from this ceremony, this ritual ceremony, is that whether or not something happens outside, something definitely happens inside, and benefit, anisong, as we say in Thai, which means fruits of your efforts, or the beneficial results which come from your auspicious efforts. You will definitely receive that anisong. You will receive some reward from that. If you wish to try this in Thailand, or if there are monks in your country who you can offer to, who will chant the kata, here's a little tip. So you should be kneeling and take the receptacle, put the bowl on the floor, and hold the receptacle gently and slowly tilt it to let the water become pouring, just as the monk begins to chant. Wait for him to begin, and as you hear him start the chant with Yatha Viravaha Pura, those 3 words, that is where you start to pour and allow the water to slowly pour out as he is chanting. Mani Choti Raso Yatha. Then, when you hear him say that, Mani Choti Raso Yatha, you must place your hands together, Panama, make the palms of your hands together, as the monks then begin to chant the bestowal of the blessings. And so, to give it a run over before I chant those blessings, what the monks would chant, we'll go back one step to the Yatha Katha, the Katha for transference of merit, which Thai people call Yatha for short, and that you should hold the water receptacle ready to pour and begin pouring just as you hear the monks begin with Yatha Vari Vaha Pura, and keep pouring through, as they say, Paripurenti Sakarang Ewa Mewa Ito Tinang Betanang Upakapati Ichitang Batitang Tumhang Kipamewa Samichato Sape Purento Sankapa Janto Panaraso Yatha Manichoti Raso Yatha. And that is where you should be pouring the very last drop, just as he says the last line, or they say the last line, which is Yatha Manichoti Raso Yatha. And so you begin pouring with Yatha Variwaha, and you end pouring with Mani Choti Raso Yatha. And so I will chant one time this kata in full. You can perhaps hold your hands and practice as if you were pouring to hear the beginning and learn to recognize the last line. So you can maybe pause and repeat this repeatedly until you get it right, after which you would then hear the Buddhist blessings from the monks. So I will do both and I will say stop pouring at the end and say to bow down and pray with your hands as the monks start to chant. So I will speak between the two kata to indicate where the water pouring stops and where you then put your praying hands to your forehead and receive the blessings from the monks, and then prostrate 3 times. So begin with holding the receptacle ready for pouring. The monks begin Yatha Variwaha Pura Paripurenti Sakarang Ewa Mewa Ito Tinang Petanang Upakapati Ichitang Batitang Tumhang Kipamewa Samichato Sape Purentu Sankapa Janto Panaraso Yatha Manichoti Raso Yatha. Stop pouring. Place your hands together in front of your forehead with the tips of your thumbs placed together also, and the tips of your thumbs at the level of your eyebrows between your eyes. And the monks begin with Sapitiyo Viwachantu Saparoko Vinatsato Mate Pawavantarayo Sukhitika Yuko Pawa Apiwatana Silitsa Nicha Utabachayino Jataro Tammawatanti Ayu Wano Sukhang Parang. You may also receive a longer version of that, which is almost roughly 3 repetitions of the kata, 3 repetitions of the first half of the kata, and one chanting of the full kata. But most monks will just do the short version, which is what I just did. And so once they stop doing that, you do 3 prostrations to the floor. Lowering your forehead, you place your hands down to the floor, palms outstretched downwards, and you can use your thumbs, if you outstretch your thumbs, to place them to touch each other's tips to the sides. That is precisely the distance where your head can fit between your 2 palms, which are lowered to the floor and placed on the floor. And your thumbs can then also protect your forehead from actually hitting the floor. It's a good measurement to use, and most Thai people learn to do that in order to train the correct positioning with prostrations. And so that is more or less how to do Kruat Nam, the pouring of water to dedicate to dead relatives or to all beings everywhere, all the dead. And of course, a lot of different benefits, some of which I've already mentioned, the main benefits. And must also perhaps also append the fact that Kruat Nam is a ritual which is connected to Tat Kaya Sit, or to Kaya Siddhis, sacred objects which are believed to be either sacred or be inhabited by sacred things or beings. So Kaya Sit actually means bodies that have special sacredness to the things, sacred objects. So it's connected to sacred things. Kruat Nam is a connection between all sacred things, and the rewards of Kruat Nam will be reflected back on he who dedicates his or her merits selflessly and with pure heart and to truly mean it. And then it should result, if you truly mean it, this should result both in that the people who you dedicated the merit to successfully receive them because of the power of your true intention, and that also he who gave those merits, namely yourself, will also receive fruits and blessings from that selfless act, meritorious act of dedication. And so that's the benefits and the method and the meaning of Piti Kruat Nam. Kruat Nam has a lot of story to it. One can call it a tamnan, which is a legend, meaning a legend, or a legendary thing. But I would actually prefer to say it's a historical thing than a legendary thing, because it doesn't really come from myth, it comes from fact. And so if we look at the origins of the ceremony, where it came from, there is one, and I say no indito as a legend, but actually I believe this is a true story, of the Patau Pimpisan, or King Pimpisara, who was the king of the city of Ratchagiri, or Ratchakrut in Thai, we would call Ratchakrut, which was in the Makata district of India, Makata province, kingdom. And so it is said in this legend that King Pimpisara, the king of Ratchagiri, had once met the Buddha and become a student of him before the Buddha had become enlightened, and had asked the Buddha to tell him of any advancements or realizations he may achieve, to come and tell him as the first person. At that time, King Pimpisara was fully ordained as king of Ratchagiri, but after this meeting with the Buddha, he became a Brahman ascetic under a certain guru. It was then, some years later, when the Buddha became enlightened, that King Pimpisara saw his own Brahman guru bow to the Buddha and become his devotee and change faith to become a Buddhist monk. And this destroyed the last of his suspicions. And King Pimpisara then also became a faithful devotee of the Buddha and a Buddhist. And he then he donated the Wat Weluwan, donated a bamboo forest to the Buddha for the Sangha to stay, and that was the first temple. Wat Weluwan was the first donated Sangha domain ever from King Pimpisara, and he invited the Buddha and the monks to receive alms in the palace, and the Buddha recommended he should perform the pouring of water, because all of his relatives, his dead relatives, were coming around and were asking to receive some of his merits for having entered the Buddha religion and to have become a disciple of the Dhamma, of the Buddha Dhamma. And so he performed this ceremony for the first time to offer to the dead relatives. And so it is said that since this time, Buddhists have practiced Kruat Nam as a way of transference of merit to the dead, or to your relatives, or to your Jaugam Nai Wen, your enemies, in this life and other lives. And I would like to recommend that one should also include forgiveness for those who have harmed us, and to offer that too in the transference of merits. And so that was the explanation of how to perform Kruat Nam and transfer your merits to the dead relatives. And so I'll finish off with one more time, going through the actions. With the receptacle and the bowl, you hold the receptacle, the pouring receptacle, horizontally, and slowly begin to tip and pour slowly, maintaining the water pouring until the end of the kata. You start pouring with Yatha Varivaha Pura Paripurenti Sakarang Ewa Mewa Ito Tinang Petanang Upakapati Ichitang Patitang Tumhang Kipamewa Samichatu Sape Burentu Sankapa Janto Panaraso Yatha Manichoti Raso Yatha. Stop pouring, and then place your hands together at your forehead with your thumbs placed together and the tips of your thumbs touching between your eyebrows, and hear the prayer. Sapitiyo oiwa chantu saparoko vinachatu mate pavat vantarayo sukhiti kayoko pawa sapitiyo viva chantu saparoko vinachatu mate pavat vantarayo sukhiti kayoko pawa sapitiyo viva chantu saparoko vinachatu Mate pavat vantarayo sukhiti kayoko pawa api vatana silitsani chang utabajayino jataro tamavatanti ayo ano sukhang palang. And then you place your hands to the floor apart with two outstretched thumbs distanced, touching the tips of the thumbs, and slowly bow forward, placing your forehead between the palms of your hands, with your nose somewhere just above your thumbs, where your thumbs are placed. Try to keep your bottom stuck with the heels of your feet as you kneel, for it is impolite if your bottom raises up as you bow your head down to the floor. Many people from the West get backache with that, and it takes a lot of practice. So don't be disappointed if you find you can't do it at the beginning. As to the meaning of the kata used for Piti Kruat Nam, the kata, the first one, Yatha Varivaha Purenti, which you do when you're pouring the water. This kata translates roughly as, just as a stream that is overflowing, which gives its extra water into the sea, so is the dana offerings, which relatives are giving from the world of the living to those who have passed on into the next world. They will receive the fruits of those merits accordingly. May your wish to offer them be fulfilled completely like the full moon, and shine like the Mani Chod crystal. As the kata reaches the words Mani Choti Raso Yatha at the end of the kata, that is where you let the last drops fall out of the phial into the receptacle. And so That was the basic meaning. That it's a stream overflowing, giving its overflowing water like dana as offerings of merits from the living relatives to the dead relatives in the next world, and that they will receive the merits, as much merit depending on how much you mean it and how much willpower you put into that and how pure of heart you are. The degree of purity and true intention is the measure of how much of those merits the dead relatives will receive. So that is the meaning of the kata for Piti Gruat Nam. There are a lot more stories about Gruat Nam from dating before Buddhist times, Brahmin legends, which state the reason why Gruat Nam began as a ceremony. Different stories tell different reasons, and so who knows where it truly began. But what is for sure is that it's thousands of years old practice, and that it is also a form of ancestor worship, which is a tens of thousands year old practice, and of course connected with animism, not just Brahmanism and Buddhism. And so that's, I think, about all I'm ready to tell today about the Piti Gruat Nam, because there are so many peripheral issues, peripheral stories and connected stories that I could just go on forever about it. And so I think that's enough for now, and hope this has been helpful in assisting you in understanding the Gruat Nam water pouring ceremony and the practice of offering merits to dead relatives successfully, and hope that you can begin to practice and refine your ability to practice this ritual ceremony with more ease. And so I hope this has helped. This is Ajahn Spencer for the Buddha Magic Project.
Suat Gruat Nam Imina, what foreigners may call Thai Buddhist water pouring ceremony. This is actually said after making Buddhist prayers, which in this case had been making some evening prayers to the Triple Gem, Buddha, Dhamma and Sangha, and after, as one of the things done is to Suat Imina Gruat Nam. Imina Gruat Nam means to pour the water, droplets of water into this cup, this chalice. So you have the water pouring instrument in the chalice, and a prayer is said. So in the case of evening prayers, we would say this. If there was a leading monk leading the chanting, then he would begin with an introductory prayer, incantation to call us to chant the sharing of merits in Pali with dead relatives and with Jaugam Nai Wen, with all of the beings in suffering in samsara everywhere, but specifically for dead relatives are mentioned. And so in the case where one would be in prayers and taking the lead from a leading monk, he would begin with this call to perform the ceremony. Hantamayang utitsana titana katayo panamase. And then the congregation would follow along with the monk by chanting and raising the water pouring instrument, lifting the lid, and starting as the chant is made. The lid is lifted like this, and the vessel is used to pour water into the chalice as the chant is being performed, the mantra, the Mon, Suat Mon Gruat Imina. And one should try to not let the water run out before the chanting has ended. And so, Imina Bunya Gamena Upachaya Kunutara Ajariyo Pagara Jamata Pita Jayataka Suryo Jantimara Cha Kunawanta Narapija พรหมมาราจะอินทาจะโลกปาลาจะเทวตายะโมมิตามนุสสาจะมัชฌตาเวริกาปิจะสัพเพสัตตาสุขีโหนตุปุญญานิปกตานิเมสุขังจะติวิทังเทนโตขิปังปาเปทโวมตังอิมินาปุญญกรรมเมนะอิมินาอุทิเสนะจะขิปาหังสุลเพเจวะขันหุบาทานเชทนังเยสันตาเนหินาธรรมายาวานิพานโตมะมังนัสสันตุสัพพทาเยวะยัตถชาโตภเวภเวอุชุจิตังสติปัญญาสะเลโควิริยัมหินามาราลพันตุมุโนกาสังกาตุนจวิริเยสุเมพุทธาทิปวโรนาโทธัมโมนาโทวารุตโมนาโทปัจเจกพุทโธจะสังโฆนาโทตโรมะมังเตโสตมานุภาเวนะมาโรกาสังละพันตุมา And so, once the last drops have been poured into the chalice, you put the receptacle or the vessel back. You can place the lid back on it, on the top, and the bowl is then usually taken and the water is poured onto the earth at the roots of a tree. And that is for various reasons, which perhaps I could go into more detail in another media publication, another video cast or podcast to explain, because there are various reasons, such as spirits within the trees, but also that some of those spirits may also be ancestors, and to give respect to the earth and the spirits of the earth and Mother Earth. And so the water is then taken in the chalice and poured onto a tree, and prayer in the heart for dedication of merit. And that was Suad Gruat Nam Imina, Thai Buddhist water pouring ceremony to dedicate merit to dead relatives and all beings in samsaric existence. Sajjan Spencer for the Buddha Magic Project, once again hoping this helps you all to understand Thai Buddhism, signing off. One last for your information, the use of water in Gruat Nam Imina is also directly related to the ancient Vedic view that water is used to transmit life, and it is the source of life, and it is used as the transmission method. And that is also another reason why water is used to transmit the merits in a very subtle fashion through its fluidity and its ability to transmit and pass through from one place to the other, and that it transmits and is a source of life. And so that is one of the reasons for the use of water in Suad Gruat Nam Imina. So previously to this podcast, I made a podcast which was showing Gruat Nam Imina, which is much less seen, of Thai Buddhist water pouring ceremony to dedicate merits. But actually the prayer which I showed with that is used more after evening prayers, and will be seen less with the water pouring as will be seen with yatha, which is much more the commonly seen practice of water pouring when the Anumotana Ramkatha, the sharing of merits with the dead, the yatha, katha, yatha prayer is chanted. And so it is necessary now for the third podcast in this series. The first was explaining a lot about the ceremony itself and gave this katha, and the second one was showing how to do it with Imina, with the katha for Imina, Punyakammina. And now this third podcast is to show how the much more commonly water pouring ceremony is performed to the kata yata. And it goes like this, which the water will be poured from a receptacle into a chalice during the time it is chanted, and after which blessing comes called sapitio. So first I will give you both of them. So the water pouring is performed during the chanting of the yata and should not run out until the end of the chanting. So you have to time the pouring of the water, which is quite difficult. And sometimes it runs out, but anyway, you have to try to make it run the whole time the kata is being chanted. After that, the water is poured and a second kata is usually chanted by the monks and the congregation if they are practicing and keeping precepts in the temple, or if they have just made alms giving to the monks on the street or in the village, then they will just hear the yata and the sapitio and just hold their hands praying and pour the water. During the sapitio part, the water is not poured. The pouring of the water is only done during the yata. So firstly, kata, yata for the pouring of the water. And then I will announce the second part, which is sapitio, which is what the monks always chant after receiving alms to give blessings to the devotees. So firstly, yata goes like this. Yata varivaha pura paripurenti sakarang eva meva ito tinang petanang upakapati ichitang batitang tumhang kipameva samichatu sapphe purentu sankapa janto banaraso yatha manichoti raso yatha. And the water would be finished pouring and close the bottle and take the receptacle of water to be poured on the earth at the roots of a tree. And then the congregation or the monks, depending on the situation, continue with Sapitio vivachantu saparoko vinatsatu mate pavavantarayo sukhi tika yuko pava apivatana silitsanichang utapachayino chattaro dhamma vatanti ayuvano sukhang palang. And that would be the giving of blessings for a long life, happiness and good health, and to have all of the requisites and requirements needed, food and money and resources, to have a happy, auspicious life. This second kata, sapitio, is actually repeated a longer way by the monks and sometimes shortened, as was just heard. The long version would go from sapitio up to pawa and then repeat until the third time after pawa would continue with the second verse of apivatana and would go like this. Sapitiyo vivachantu saparoko vinatsatu mate pavatwantarayo sukhi tikayuko pavasapitiyo vivachantu saparoko vinatsatu mate pavatwantarayo sukhi tikayuko pava Sapitiyo vivachantu saparoko vinatsatu mate pavatwantarayo sukhi tikayuko pava apivatana silitsanichang utabachayino jattaro dhamma vatanti ayuvano sukhang parang. But for the main kata, which I intended to reveal for this podcast to focus on, is of course yata, which is the most common and usual kata to hear during the water pouring, or to chant yourself if you have no monks and you are practicing on your own. And one more time with yata and sapitio in one go. ยะถาวะริวหาปุราปริปูเรนติสาคารังเอวะเมวะอิโตทินังเบตานังอุปกปปติอิชิตังบัติตังตุมหังคิปะเมวะสมิจฉตุสัพเพปูเรนตุสังคปาจันโทปะนะระโสยะถามณิโชติระโสยะถา and end the water pouring and continue with final blessing. Sappitio vivachantu sapparo ko vinassatu mate pavatvantarayo sukhithikayuko phava Sappitio vivachantu sapparo ko vinassatu mate pavatvantarayo sukhithikayuko phava Sappitio vivachantu sapparo ko vinassatu mate pavatvantarayo sukhithikayuko phava abhivatana silitsaniccang uttabajayino jattaro dhamma vatthanti ayuvanno sukhang phalang. And that was Ajahn Spencer showing the traditional katha chanting for Gruat Nam water pouring ceremony to dedicate merits to dead relatives and ancestors and to pour the water onto the earth. That's Ajahn Spencer for the Buddha Magic Project, signing off.